Good morning. It's April 27th, 2022. Welcome to Triggered. I am Cory Morgan. This is the Western Standard's daily live news, opinion, video, you name it, show. We do this Monday to Friday, 11:30 a.m. and Mountain Standard Time till about 1 o'clock p.m. Being live, I see Claudette and David already in there in the comment scroll, and I really like seeing that. I like to remind people if they're here for their first time or whatnot, use the comment options. Get in there, interact. Live comes with a whole bunch of challenges. We get technical issues, we get guests who sometimes don't make it, things like that. But it's worth it if we can get the back and forth with other people. It's not like another recorded, canned show. So it's great to see you guys checking in from all over the place on there in the comment scroll, and be sure, chat with each other, discuss things with, throw comments out, throw questions out for my guests. I don't necessarily read them all out on the air, but I see them all, and it's just good to see an interactive show on the go. These are the modern platform, and it's a great way to share our news. Talk radio is going by the wayside. Mainstream media has certainly gone to crap. So platforms like this are the way to go, and I really like doing it live. So thank you guys for tuning in, and let's have a fun day here. I got 3 guests packed in today. I got a really full show. First one's going to be Drew Barnes. He's the independent MLA for Cypress Medicine Hat. He's, of course, was punted from the UCP. He's been, I guess you could say, kind of the conservative critic as an independent over on the side of the legislature there, and he's putting a motion forward asking for the fair deal movement and such to be put forward seriously by the UCP because it seems to have fallen by the wayside. And then a little after that, I'm going to talk with Western Standard BC reporter Reid Small. He's dropped a number of interesting and good stories. He's our main man out in BC there, and he writes all sorts of stuff for the Western Standard, so we can break down and discuss some of those stories. There's a crazy one with a video attachment that somebody attacking people on a bus. It's really bizarre, so I'll talk to Reid about that. And the federal director of the Canadian Taxpayer Federation, Franco Terrazzano, was kind of a last-minute addition, but why not? He actually happens to be downtown today. So we're going to bring him in the studio in person and catch up on some taxpayer items and things like that. So yes, lots to cover. And of course, I am going to go on and rant and talk about current issues as they're going. And I've got one. Well, I've always got something. Got my blood pressure up. I've always got my vein pulsing. That's how I live. I enjoy it, actually. So I'm not as crabby as I sound. Either way, where do we begin with this one? So, I mean, it seems like every city and region has a fear-mongering doctor who's a media go-to person for all things COVID, especially, when the legacy media wants somebody who's going to consistently talk about all the worst possible outcomes of the virus and how we must violate individual rights in order to keep the infections down. Well, in Alberta, that doctor is a fellow named Joe Vipond. Now, throughout the pandemic, it's been difficult to turn on the TV out here and not see Dr. Vaipond on the screen, offering dire warnings and harshly criticizing the government for their heartless and dangerous actions. Dr. Vaipond has quite the flair for the dramatic. He even broke down in tears during an interview once as he feared for the fate of the children due to what he felt were terrible and dangerous moves being done by the Premier Kenney as he was working to lift pandemic restrictions. No children were found to be harmed by those lifting, by the way. Vaipond always wants you to know he's a doctor. He never wants you to forget that. He wears his scrubs everywhere he goes. I mean, I've seen him in downtown parks at rallies. He's got his full scrubs on. He even often has his stethoscope hanging over his neck when he does his many media appearances around the province. One place few people have actually seen him is in medical facilities practicing his trade. It's hard to imagine he has much time to treat patients when he's flying across the globe during the Omicron outbreak in order to attend a climate change conference in Scotland or when he's holding pro-lockdown rallies around the province. Dr. Vaipond isn't a doctor who happens to be a political activist. He's a political activist who happens to be a doctor. And it speaks volumes about the agenda of legacy media outlets when they continued to go to Vaipond and is an expert on pandemic policies when it was revealed he donated nearly $20,000 to the Rachel Notley's NDP. Now, certainly Vaipond has every right to support and take part in a political party. I mean, it's a democratic right. Well, let's not pretend he can that he can be considered a balanced source when it comes to discussions on government policies. I've since referred to him as Notley's pet doctor, and I think I'll continue to. The CTV, however, refers to him as a medical expert on COVID. Well, Dr. Vaipond has found himself in the soup again, and the hypocrisy this time is just breathtaking. So Vaipond recently traveled to Ottawa for some reason or another. I imagine some sort of a conference, for a self-important purpose. And never one to pass up on the opportunity to virtue signal, he posted a picture of the travel kit he's taking in order to ensure he protects himself and others from the dreaded virus. He showed the air purifier he takes with him. Yeah, he packs an air purifier for his hotel rooms. And spoke on how he demands everybody near him to be masked and how he cracks windows and always has a full-out respirator mask on when indoors. Oh, and he wears goggles everywhere, even his Twitter profile, though there's no evidence that goggles stop any form of transmission, nor that transmission has ever happened through a profile picture for that matter. But Dr. Vaipond strongly signals his virtue. Well, to Dr. Vaipond's horror, he tested positive for COVID-19 during one of his apparent constant self-tests. So, being Dr. Vipond, he shared his test results and subsequent ones with others online as he did multiple tests to ensure that he was indeed infected. And many of his loyal followers offered sympathy and thoughts and prayers for the dear doctor in his plight. So what did Dr. Vipond do next? Well, he went out and toured Parliament Hill. Not only did he go out and potentially expose others to this infection, he took video of himself while he was at it and shared it on Twitter. Remember, this is the guy who supported locking people in hotel rooms for weeks away from their families for their dare having even entered the country, and even if they didn't test positive. Not being a total imbecile, Vaipond realized his error and deleted the video. Being a partial imbecile, though, it seems he didn't realize that it's well too late for that. The internet is forever. His dangerous and hypocritical actions have been exposed. The excuses came fast and furious as Vaipond tried to ignore the trouble he'd gotten himself into as he's worked to bury the story in a flurry of unrelated tweets. He couldn't bury the Western Standard story on the incident about it, though, and Arthur Green wrote a great one on it, so check that out online. But still, as if this wasn't all bad enough, Vaipond's now publicly tweeting that he's driving across Canada to get home in a rental car. So he's not content with just potentially spreading COVID-19 in Ottawa. Vaipond wants to see if he can spread his infection through 4 provinces while he's at it. Vaipond's assuring people on Twitter that he can't spread any disease because he's going to stay in his car and eat granola bars. You can't make this stuff up. Vaipond will somehow manage to refuel, use washrooms, and sleep without having come into any contact with people over the next few days as he drives across the country. Astounding. Vaipond also said he's been claiming he checked with the Ontario health authorities and that he's staying within their guidelines. Now, Dr. Vaipond is either lying or he didn't understand what he read, though the Ontario health requirements are pretty clear. They say that a person must remain in isolation for 5 days if they've tested positive, and that's a vaccinated person. Not should, not probably should, but must. Not for a few days, but 5. Well, isolation, I guess that could be considered open to interpretation, but I suspect a cross-country road trip doesn't fall under that definition. And Vaipond spent years telling us all how dangerous COVID-19 is. He's constantly expressed how selfish it is for people who want to go out in defiance of restrictions and isolation orders, as it could potentially harm people. So which is it? Is this a deadly disease that allows for no flexibility in avoiding isolation? If that's the case, Vaipond is knowingly putting people at risk of death as he chooses to cross the country when he knows he's COVID positive. Or does Vaipond actually understand that COVID-19 really isn't that relatively dangerous and that restrictions do little to keep people safer? That would mean that Vaipond's been feeding us all politically motivated BS for the last couple of years. In either case, Dr. Vaipond has lost all credibility. He can't and won't walk his own talk. We know that Vaipond's no longer to be taken seriously. But have our legacy media outlets realized this yet? I suspect we're going to see his masked, goggled, stethoscope-wearing visage on this TV screen in his scrubs sooner rather than later. He offers the message that the mainstream media wants to hear. That's all the more reason, guys, that we've got to stop listening to the mainstream media. Now, let's check in with a real reporter and a principled one, formerly of the mainstream media, but now with a better and more principled outlet, and that's our news editor, Dave Naylor. Hey, Dave, how's it going over there?
Cory, your rant has left me speechless. It's unbelievable.
I don't know. He doesn't even read his own tweets, I think.
No. Hey, I hear you and Duke the Wonder Dog had a special visitor the other night.
Yeah. We went out and checked the game cam the other night, and there was, I see that Nico's already got that up there. Yeah, we had a big old cougar in the backyard the other night, and I can see now, as I was complaining that Duke, constantly uses the lower lawn for the bathroom. Now I understand why he doesn't want to go up the hill into the trees, but hopefully the cougar's just passing through. We get those periodically.
Yeah, and knowing Duke, he might have tried to, mate with it or something like that, which would have gone wrong.
Yeah, it would have been
Uh,
bad. It would have made for some weird news for us.
exactly. Lots of good stuff to also keep you speechless on the Western Standard website at the moment, Cory. We've got a hearing, House of Commons hearing into Canada's actions at the fall of Kabul, when the Taliban were at the gates of the city, and how woefully unprepared Canada was. Canada had 2 airplanes at the Kabul airport to aid the evacuations, and one of them didn't even work. And then the other one was commandeered by Ambassador Sears and his people, and they fled the country, leaving behind thousands of Canadians and all those poor people who worked with Canadians. It really is a shameful episode in Canadian history, in my opinion, Cory. You mentioned that video from Reid Small. It's up there. A guy completely loses it on a bus in Abbotsford. I suggest if you're got kids around, you do not play it while the kids are in the room, because it's let's say he has a fairly limited vocabulary. Eva's got another good video up of a lunatic in somewhere in the States at a Costco, and he's masked, and he's upset that the staff aren't masked. So he brings out his pepper spray and threatening them, and people are just losing their minds today, Cory. It's the world has gone to hell in a handbasket. Other stuff we've got, Edmonton MLA Kelly McCauley demanding that Cabinet provide protection for whistleblowers. You remember last week we had the story that, thousands of pages of whistleblower testimony against Canada Revenue Agency officials were accidentally released. And now obviously these people are somewhat fearful for their job. So McCauley is demanding that the Liberals provide them protection. We've got a roundup of the number of federal workers that have been suspended by the government for not proving their vaccine mandates. It's closing in on 2,600 total people, and an interesting number from the Department of Health and the Public Health Agency, who also refused to go along with their program. Mel Risden's got a story on Canada, along with I believe the Netherlands has announced they are joining a WEF digital ID program at airports. So we all know how our viewers feel about the WEF. Christopher in Saskatchewan's got a story on the Crown out there, dropping one of the COVID charges against Maxime Bernier. He was charged after holding a rally out there, outdoors, I believe it was, that drew more than 10 people. And the truckers, speaking of that, testimony kicked off at a House of Commons inquiry last night into why the government called the Emergencies Act to deal with it. Believe it or not, Cory, the federal the emergency minister, Medicinio or something like that. I'm sorry, I forgot his name. He said he said they were worried about the truckers burning down buildings, and that's already being debunked, Cory. The Ottawa Police Service has announced that guy who tried to burn the apartment building down had nothing to do with the truckers. Yet this minister is still spreading that fake news to a House of Commons committee. And it gets even worse. He says that one of the things they used to bring, or the reasons why they brought in the Emergencies Act, was because of the CBC reports on it. Well, I mean, come on, Cory. I mean, if you saw any CBC report in the last 2 years, you'd be afraid to go out of your house. And it was especially over the top with the truckers' convoy. And CBC several times had to correct reports, including linking it to Vladimir Putin, and one that said most of the donors to the GoFundMes and Give Send Goes were foreigners, when it was absolutely false. And yet they're using those CBC stories as the reasons they brought in the Emergencies Act. It really is quite staggering, Cory.
It's brutal. I mean, yeah, they should be, this is the government with all the resources of our money in their pockets, all of this investigative ability, theoretically, and they rely on the state broadcaster to make their political decisions. This is problematic, to say the least.
Yeah, you're not kidding.
Well, lots to chew on today, as always. Yeah, it was hard to pick out which thing to really get stirred up and rant about today. There were so many to pick from, but Mr. Vaipond still won the bunch there.
Yeah, you had an embarrassment of riches today, Cory.
Oh, yeah. All right. Well, thanks for checking in. I'll let you get back at digging through all the good stuff there, and I will talk to you later, Dave.
Yeah, we'll see you on the pipeline tonight, Cory.
You bet. All right, so that's our news editor, Dave Naylor. And as always, yes, it's these news check-ins are taking a while to get through because we are just putting so much out there from reporters all over the place. So just that reminder to everybody, the reason we have these reporters, the reason we're doing well, the reason we're expanding is because you guys are subscribing. So thank you all who have already subscribed to the Western Standard. And if you haven't already, guys, get on there and take out a subscription. You can get past the paywall. It costs you less than an old newspaper subscription did. We're talking $99 a year. If you use the coupon code TRIGGERED, you save another $10 on that. And, so less than $10 a month, full access to the site. And not only that, it helps us. Every subscriber helps us build a little more fiscal stability, a little more money, and we can keep expanding our operations. So we don't have to listen to that garbage that the mainstream media and the legacy media is feeding you, that stuff on the COVID, the things like that terribly biased reporting. We need independent media to make sure we can break free of that. So please, if you haven't subscribed already, get on there. And hey, recommend it to other people. Buy a subscription on somebody else's behalf. We've talked about that before, almost jokingly, but why not? Get out there and buy one for your left-wing Uncle Louie. Drive him crazy. Maybe some common sense will get into him. You'll have something new to fight about over the next family dinner anyways. So yeah, some of those news stories, I look at some of those things like that Eva wrote one with a guy pepper spraying people in a Costco because they were unmasked. But, this gets to some of the people who believe everything the legacy media has been feeding. And this guy is terrified. I mean, it doesn't give the excuse to go pepper spray people, but it shows that this is a person who was mentally on the edge, and he was obviously pushed over through 2 years of fear-mongering and insanity. He probably felt he was saving the world by pepper spraying him. And that sort of attitude comes from years of exposure to people like Dr. Vipond, hypocrites like Vaipond, who constantly say that we're all being exposed to this deadly virus by irresponsible people going out without being properly masked and such. This is the outcome. I mean, most people, aren't going to be pushed over the edge like that and pepper spraying others, but this is a symptom of years of this sort of misinformation coming from mainstream media. I'm going to run a bet that gentleman pepper spraying unmasked people was a CNN viewer. Not CNN Plus, because that failed as fast as the new Coke did, but a CNN viewer. So, of course, he's terrified. I'm surprised that CNN viewers can even get themselves to get out of the house without wearing like an old diving bell helmet or something like that, the way they spread the fear. But our local outlets are no better as far as that goes. And then, that other video, I mean, that public transit, boy, so one of the commenters was pointing out somebody was pushed onto an LRT platform recently. There was one in Toronto. I think they were chasing down a homeless woman. She'd pushed a woman onto a platform there too, and almost killed her by, with a train coming by. There's some scary stuff. There's a lot of, it's funny with a lot of city councils and so on, Calgary and everywhere, talking. They want us to go green. They want us to ride city transit. It's horrible. It's horrible. You only ride the bus and the train if you absolutely have to. I mean, you've got to share your space with these lunatics. They're dirty. They're dangerous. In Calgary this morning, there was an injured man found at the LRT station up by Sate was closed. I was hearing that on the news on my way into work. I don't know what that was about. But when the police have a whole area taped off, I suspect he didn't trip and bonk his head while he was walking. It was something pretty serious. And what will our city councils and everything do? Well, they'll probably say, let's defund the police. Let's get more social workers on the job. That'll fix it up. That'll certainly bring it about. All right, I'm going to speak about one of our sponsors while I'm at it. We're getting these bills paid before my first guest gets here, and that is Bitcoin Well. These guys have been a good, solid sponsor for us for quite some time. And I think their business is doing quite well, too. I mean, for a number of reasons. People want to get out of central bank-controlled currencies. Danielle Smith was talking on her show the other day. It looks like, Canada's central bank might come out with their own, but it's not Bitcoin. And, people want to distance themselves from that. I mean, we saw people's bank accounts seized over the protests. We're seeing the investigations over things like that. So people want to hedge their bets. They want to get away from inflation, devaluing currency, things like that. Well, Bitcoin Well is one of the guys the companies to show you how you can get into that digital currency world. They're an Alberta-based company. They're local. They're real. They're on the ground. You can have personalized one-on-one service, set up on a meeting. It's free. And chat across a table with somebody. You know, it's no distant call center or anything like that. Real bricks and mortar service. If you aren't in one of their main cities, they'll still do it through Zoom. It's that service that makes it so important, because they can answer those questions. There's a lot of questions about digital currency, and you want trust, right? It's your money. You worked hard for it. You want to make sure that you're investing in something you can trust. They're a publicly traded company in Alberta. They're reliable. Check them out, bitcoinwell.com. See if digital currencies are for you. If they are, these are the guys that are going to help you get into it and take control of your money. Like I said, you worked hard for it. Okay, I see our guest in the lobby, and he's been here a number of times. This is the independent MLA for Cypress Medicine Hat, Drew Barnes. And as I said, he's sort of the conservative opposition party in a, well, almost kind of two-man show in the corner of the legislature, but he's been pushing and holding the government to account. And he's brought a motion forward, or bringing a motion forward, that on an issue that I think is very important. So thanks for coming on to talk to us today, Mr. Barnes.
Oh, Cory, good morning. Thanks for talking to me.
Yeah, I appreciate it. As I said, kind of in the introduction there, you're bringing a motion forward on the fair deal, I guess. And you know, it's been one of the areas that a lot of us have been disappointed with the progress with the UCP. There was a lot of campaign talk, a lot of meetings. You attended a lot of them. I went to a couple of them on this fair deal, and then it just seems to have kind of stalled.
Yeah, more than kind of. It's totally stalled. Not only was my motion based on something that Premier Kenney said to the UCP AGM in 2019, that he would use every legal, economic, and constitutional tool at Alberta's disposal to get a fair deal. You know, just 190 days ago, 62% of Albertans voted to end equalization. A short time after that, the Legislative Assembly passed a motion to end equalization, and here we are where nothing's been done. You know, and Cory, it's you know, we've seen Scott Moe next door. When Quebec declares they're a nation within a nation, Premier Moe immediately steps up and asks the same for Saskatchewan, or highlights the same for Saskatchewan. And we have a premier in Alberta who, you know, I believe at this point had no intention of fighting with Ottawa for a fair deal for us. And, you know, we've talked about the numbers so much. When it's $670 billion that has left Alberta families and communities and our free enterprise since 1961, when we're bottlenecked for resource movement and pipelines, that's no exchange in return for the money we send. And his unwillingness to do something is appalling. Hey, but I will say I'm grateful that, you know, we had unanimous consent in the Assembly to do this. I mean, I don't know how many times Premier Kenney needs this message, but one more time.
Yeah. So that motion, when is it due to actually come before the legislature?
It came on Monday already.
Okay, sorry about that.
No worries. It's already been done. I'll just take a quick second. I'll read it. Be it resolved that the Legislative Assembly urge the government to deploy every legal, economic, and constitutional tool at the province's disposal to maximize its ability to achieve a fair deal for Alberta within the Canadian Federation. You know, again, the Premier Kenney and the UCP put in weaker turn off the taps legislation than the NDP had before. We've seen the federal government print $400 billion, increase the money supply 20%, destroy the value of our hard-earned currency and our hard-earned work with huge inflation. Now we're going to have high interest rates. Hey, there's always the time to push Ottawa for a fair deal.
Well, absolutely. I had Kelly Mellenberg on the show the other day. We were talking about agricultural issues. I mean, it just seems if it's not the energy sector Ottawa's attacking us with, it's our ag sector. And they're looking at reductions in emissions through fertilizer, bringing those down to 30% below 2020 levels. Like, this could be devastating for the prairies. Yet again, this is a regionally targeted action on the part of the federal government. I mean, they're not going to target Ontario producers or Quebec ones. This is based on cereal farmers. Where's Premier Kenney on this? Why, you know, we've got these issues. We need to be pushing back and standing up for ourselves. We're going to keep getting walked all over.
Exactly. And another issue he's been totally silent on, you know, the carbon tax is hurting our Western communities, our agriculture industry, and it's about to escalate. You know, Premier Kenney and the UCP failure doing something with the carbon tax. Never mind C-48, the tanker ban, and as you just mentioned, C-69, the net zero emissions, which is going to make our electricity even more expensive, maybe as much as 3 times more, and again hurt Western industries. And it's just the invisibleness. Ottawa is just as much in every part of our lives as they were before, if not more, with the recent daycare announcement. Cory, it's one of the things when we talk about, how are we going to get there instead? It's one of the reasons that I've been really big on 3 things. First of all, Alberta needs its own written constitution. I sent Premier Kenney a letter way back when I was still in the UCP caucus, asking if I could be the MLA that went around Alberta and help our experts and our people, especially our people, develop a written constitution so we could limit the growth of government. We could insist on our fair Ottawa, could further define our culture. That would go a long way to help us continue on, start rather and continue on the independence we need from Ottawa. Second, we know that Premier Kenney put in citizen-initiated referendum laws that are not achievable. Appears to be a huge waste of time. We need a meaningful citizen-initiated referendum legislation. So if the government won't do it, if Premier Kenney won't do it, at least the people of Alberta can. And of course, with that, Cory, I've said for a year and a half that we should have an independence referendum sometime down the road. I always say 3 years. Tell Ottawa we're going to give them 3 years to give us a fair deal, and then 3 years from now let Albertans evaluate whether or not the deal is fair enough for them to continue. We have to put some teeth in this conversation. And Cory, the third thing that needs to happen is Premier Kenney needs to go. The leadership review is a mess. Albertans have totally lost confidence in the UCP government. The last year of polls show Rachel Notley knocking on the door to be our next premier. We so need change.
Absolutely. That was another disappointment. I mean, the citizens initiated legislation and the recall both were set. They were put out with impossible bars. And this is a government that knows very well how to create a viable policy if they want to. So it was purposely put out in a form that they knew was never going to be utilized. And I find that kind of insulting as a supporter and a voter who wanted to see those legislations come about.
Yeah, exactly. I absolutely agree. And he only proclaimed them when we raised the temperature and forced the issue a bit. And of course, now we're 13 months to the next election. But yeah, that was a key campaign promise that he made and didn't meet it with any meaningful way. And he was given a large majority to enhance accountability, to enhance economic freedom and individual opportunity, and do something about our ineffective and inefficient programs where they exist. And he so hasn't delivered it and met expectations. And yeah, recall is another perfect example, Cory, of us former Wild Rosers who desired unity and wanted to work for a conservative Alberta, and Alberta being the freest, most prosperous place. And we were disrespected. We so many areas, maybe all of our areas, we weren't honored. We wanted meaningful recall. We wanted enhancement of property rights. We wanted a government that spent less so families could have more individual opportunity and economic freedom. And here we are 3 years into the mandate where every day, it seems like the government just fights for Premier Kenney's survivorship instead of our economic future.
Yeah, well, there's no getting around it. I mean, the amount of distraction over the internal fights with the party right now and the battle over the leadership review. I mean, not that, he's not faultless. He got himself into that as the leader in the first place. But I can see why Premier Kenney hasn't had much time to pay attention to Ottawa. He's busy trying to save his own butt within the party, which is unfortunate. Maybe kind of looking ahead a little more, though. I mean, it's speculative. But Cheryl Dawn, a commenter, asking, if Kenney was replaced, could you go back to the UCP? And I understand that would depend on who the new leader is and a number of things. But would you consider going back in that situation? Because it takes two.
Yeah, thank you, Cory. I appreciate that. Yeah, the only caveat is as long as Jason Kenney is not the leader and the premier, I will consider all options. I'm just so grateful to represent Cypress Medicine Hat for 10 years. And Medicine Hat, the Chamber of Commerce, just had a really good trade show there for the last weekend, and I had 3 days where I got to talk to hundreds of my constituents, and I asked them, what should I do? Should I run as an independent? Should I, if Premier Kennedy goes away, should I try to get back in the UCP? Should I join Wild Rose Independence Party? Should I join one of the other conservative parties on the right? And I'm very, very grateful that people respected the work I've done and where I'm at. A lot of them, basically said they'd respect my decision. And I'm spending lots of time talking to my constituents. I'm spending lots of time talking to Albertans about the best direction forward. And, again, I'm grateful to be one of 87 people paid to speak on behalf of Albertans. And I think we need more accountability. We need better chance to have our voices heard. Hey, that's just another key area where Premier Kenney hasn't respected us.
Yeah, well, and in a few weeks, we're going to have some clarity, at least one way or another, of where things are going. I don't know if it necessarily is going to mean a calm stability or anything. None of us really knows what's looming up there, but I know it's difficult. There's a good and a bad of being an independent member. I mean, one, at least you only have to answer to your constituents. I mean, you don't have to worry about the party. You'll speak whatever you like. But at the same time, it's difficult as an independent because you get limited amount of time with questions. You get limited research budget and things like that. So, I imagine getting into a functional party environment would probably be the best scenario for you if that can happen.
Yeah, it takes a group to make some changes for sure. But, that's one of the interesting things. 3 MLAs elected in the general election can form a new provincial party and run in the next election. May 18th decision making may affect some changes there. As an independent, I've had the opportunity to have quite an involvement in the legislature. I will say Speaker Cooper has been excellent for giving us some opportunity and leeway with our questions. And I believe that myself and Todd Lowen have done a great job holding the government accountable. We've brought up some, taxation things and economic freedom things, highlighted, a lot of the arrogance and lack of listening from the current government. So there has been a plus. But future going forward, everybody's, one of everybody's big concerns is Rachel Notley being returned as premier, but they know that Jason Kenney is not the answer of economic freedom and individual opportunity we desire. We've got 13 months till the next election, which of course is May 29th, 2023. And Cory, you were part of it at the time when the floor crossings in the Wild Rose happened in 2015. That was December. That election was March or April. I believe it was April. So within 4 months, that group rallied and we had 21 strong. We had 21 strong MLAs. We had 87 strong candidates. So there's time. And again, I'm very pleased that Albertans, more than ever, and God bless people for standing up. Every Saturday for a year and a half in my office, I've had between 100 and 400 peaceful legal demonstrators out front, demonstrating for more freedoms. The truckers, the people that moved their money out of the bank, showed Ottawa that legally and peacefully we're going to fight for our families and our communities. So it's a good time. I think it's a time for change.
Well, I sure hope so. And as you said, yes, you and Mr. Lowen have been effective off to the side. There's so many scenarios we could potentially see. One of the areas it caused a bit of a stir, actually. It's been a while back, but I interviewed Premier Kenney, and I said, well, you're only getting opposition, at least at that time, from one side of the legislature, and it's the left, and that tends to push you towards the left. But the media took it as me saying another thing, but whatever. I just think it's important to have a balance and have a conservative voice, because if you are only getting pressure from one side, that is where you're going to drift, and you need a voice of conscience coming from the other side, or you'll only hear one perspective. So I appreciate what you and Todd have been doing over there.
Yeah, thank you, Cory. I absolutely agree 100%. And let me give you an example. I used to stand with Premier Kenney when we were both in opposition, and he used to say things like the NDP is the biggest spendthrift government ever, and if we don't change them, they're going to put us $100 billion in debt. Well, here's the reality today. Premier Kenney's put us $115 billion in debt. The NDP at their high water mark spent $55 billion. Premier Kenney this year is spending $62 billion. And if oil and gas royalties, God bless our agriculture, forestry, and our oil and gas workers, if oil and gas royalties and taxes hadn't gone from $3 billion to $13 billion in the last year, he'd have had a huge deficit. And so let's get people in charge that want to leave that money with Alberta family communities want taxes and utilities and more competition in our insurance and our utility and our telecommunications industries. Put Alberta families first, and free enterprise, competition and choice are the ways to do that.
Right on. Well, I really appreciate you coming on, Drew. It's always good to get you on here. And I got a feeling perhaps the next time we talk, we'll see, but is going to be, we'll have, like I said, perhaps some more clarity on where the future is, or perhaps it's going to be crazier than ever, but things are going to change in a few weeks. So thanks for holding the fort up there on the right side of the legislature and keeping us up to date.
Okay, Cory, thank you very much. Appreciate the chance to talk to you.
Great. Thanks, Drew. We'll talk again soon, I'm sure. So yes, that was the independent MLA for Cypress, Medicine Hat, Drew Barnes. And as I said, it's I do appreciate that. It's important to have some push from the other side. Things I've talked about before, some of the best federal government we ever had was the Chrétien government with the Reform Party breathing down their neck on the right. I mean, Chrétien balanced the budget. I mean, no, Chrétien wasn't perfect. Oh, they did a lot of bad things, those guys. But when you get a conservative opposition, a conservative threatening you, the way to counter it is to make sure you swing right. Don't let them eat your lunch on the conservative area. If you get nothing but leftist opposition, you're tempted to start sliding that way. But again, as Drew had pointed out, it's this lack of action on the Ottawa front. We have a hostile federal government. We've always had a hostile federal government. And despite some very strong promises on the part of Premier Kenney, he just hasn't seemed to have followed through on using all those tools to push back against it. So, putting that motion forward, there's limited things that an MLA can do. Is limited, doesn't put much obligation on the government itself, but it brings it out, makes them vote for it, and makes it harder for them to keep kicking that can down the road. So I appreciate him coming on and talking. And yeah, we'll see what happens in a couple of weeks. I mean, something else that's interesting, and Drew alluded to that. If, say, Kenney stays in, he remains as the premier, we could tell there's a number of MLAs who are not going to stay in that caucus. There's just no way. I can't see Peter Guthrie staying in there, or Jason Steffen, some of the more outspoken ones who have been very critical of Premier Kenney. I mean, Kenney was already saying he's been too light on people who dissent within his party. They're going to be out. I mean, even if he doesn't kick them out, they're going to leave. So you will have, and as Drew said, all you need is 3 people banded together in the legislature, and then you've got automatic party status. So there could be a conservative opposition across the floor from Kenney, which is good and bad. As I said, a conservative opposition is a good thing. But at the same time, we get into that danger that everybody worries about with 2 conservative parties in the legislature. Could Premier Notley slither up the middle again and become, or I shouldn't say Premier Notley already in advance, Rachel Notley do that and become the premier again? That's scary, and a lot of people are worried about that. So conservative members, they got a lot of tough choices to make one tough choice to make in this period of time. We'll see what happens with it. Really bizarre provincial politics. Maybe I'll move a little more onto the bizarre BC politics, as Reid is going to be here in a little while. This is a story on April 22nd. Provincial court heard this is a guy who's suing a bunch of bars because he got drunk, fall down, and hurt himself. Now, I owned a bar for a number of years, and it's not a pleasant thing in a lot of ways. Part of what gets me is the lack of personal responsibility, the way our law is right now. And I was trying to find the story. I wish somebody, if it could find it maybe for on my behalf. It was some years ago. It was like W5 or something like that. And I watched the story of this clown who was in Ontario somewhere, Windsor or something, and he was out drinking after work. And, at the bar, lots of people do that. They'll have a couple of drinks. And then they went to another bar, and then they went to a party, and they kept drinking and drinking. And then they went through the park, a bunch of staff, and he decided to go dive in the water at this park in a pond. And it turned out the pond bottom was concrete. And it was only a few inches deep. He broke his neck and was paralyzed. Tragic. Unfortunate. People make stupid decisions. It's unfortunate. You don't want to see that end. This guy, though, sued everybody. He sued his coworkers for not stopping him. He sued the city for not having big enough signs saying there was a concrete bottom on it. And of course, he sued every bar that he was involved with. He bankrupted his friends and coworkers. He won. He won on all those levels. At what point is a person responsible for themselves? And I know a bar has some responsibility. When I was bartending, if somebody's falling over drunk at my bar and I'm still giving them more drinks, I'm being irresponsible and I'm putting people at risk, including the person I'm giving drinks to. But it's not the easiest thing to judge, especially when a drunkard is going from bar to bar to bar. Not everybody is evidently drunk as others. Yet here we go with this guy named Johnson. He's in BC, So let's see. His evening began in Kingston Tap House, where he worked as a bartender. He finished his shift at 11, drank a couple double vodka sodas, and then he left to Studio Lounge and Nightclub, where he had 2 more drinks and a couple shots of whiskey in short order. And then he moved on to another bar, Relish the Pub, where he downed 2 more ciders and a double vodka soda and a shot of whiskey. Then finally went to yet another bar, and he drank 3 double shots then. So he drank a whole pile. This guy's pretty ripped. And then he fell and injured his head. Now he's suing them all. Now, I don't know. I just can't see in those first couple of bars them knowing he's drunk. Like, what? How can you sue somebody for serving you the first 3 drinks when you've gone on to have 17 elsewhere? But, you know, we got clowns and judges who will still rule in favor of this idiot. How far down the line does it get? And as I said, I've known in bars, when somebody comes in, if they're presenting as sober, I don't breathalyze them. Some people can hold their head up even though they've tipped back a dozen. I don't know that. If I'd served them all 12 in the bar, well, I wouldn't even serve that many. I know they're drunk, even if they're saying straight. But if you're going bar to bar to bar, they don't know. Yet, this is what we've got going on in BC. That's one of the stories Reid wrote about. So yeah, served 20 drinks after work. So yeah, this guy was a wreck. I think in that final bar, and it was getting that late at night, there was probably some irresponsibility on the part of the bartender or the staff or something, because he should have been showing some pretty clear signs of inebriation by then. But I just get sick of this total, it's personal responsibility, you know, and if you want to get to the root of so many things, a left-right, you know, the left-right difference, one of the biggest things, conservatives, particularly libertarians, want to take care of themselves. We don't want to be taken care of. Just leave me alone. I'll take care of myself. And if there's negative consequences, I'll have to deal with it. The left does not want personal responsibility on any level. They don't. Everything is everybody else's responsibility. Everything is everybody else's problem. I can't pay my bills. You've got to pay my bills. I can't keep myself under control drinking. You've got to keep me under control drinking. I'm scared of the flu. You have to be locked in your house. It always comes down to personal responsibility. And it's getting tiresome. You know, when we're talking about Twitter and the left losing their nut over Musk buying it, because Musk is daring to say he's going to open up speech on there. See, the problem is, no, you don't have to listen to anything anybody tweets. You don't have to. You don't have to participate in Twitter. Or the voices you don't like, you know what you can do? Block them. It's not that hard. It only takes a second. But you know what the problem they have is? That takes a little bit of personal responsibility. They actually have to think. Make a decision. Do something on their own. They don't want that. Just shut up the nasty voices. I don't want to hear them. No. No. Pull up your britches. Take care of yourself. Hit the block button. Don't try to get the government to do it on your behalf. But it always kind of comes down to that in the end. It really does. And the whole feeling of it all, again, with nanny state, coddling state, taking care of everything all the time. Not only does it not help us, but it eradicates that sense of personal responsibility. And when you've got a sense of personal responsibility, that's how you prevent things from happening, because you know you've got a consequence later on. But again, these things carry on. So yeah, getting back to that, let's see some of these news scrolls as we get towards Reid's joining me here. Government, yeah, relied on CBC stories. Like, as we're still getting this follow-up on the whole truckers convoy and the protests and everything, you know, the more you hear from these committees, the more nauseating it gets. I mean, CBC stories, as Dave was saying, the CBC had to retract multiple stories because they were spreading BS. They were wrong. They were lies. Yeah, our $1.5 billion a year, we're going to this rotten institution of the state broadcaster, and they were spreading lies during the course of the convoy, and the government was basing their decisions on the lies from the CBC. Gee, a real shocker that the government made bad decisions. You know, there's even a new Democrat MP questioning them now, even though they all voted in favor of invoking the War Measures Act, or I'm sorry, the Emergencies Act, and said that they've heard from the Liberals time and time again that these decisions were made on the basis of facts. Well, let's see them. They're not there. I mean, we should have thrown this government out a while back, but what is it going to take? What is it going to take? David Creighton, one of our columnists who's always hitting things on the federal front, points out, you know, it's Teflon Trudeau. It just doesn't seem to be anything that can scrape him. We loathe them in the West. They love him in Toronto and Montreal, and that's enough to keep him in power. Which again gets back to the independence talk. I saw, there's an area I differ with Drew a bit too, actually, when it comes to independence and things like that. And I saw one of the commenters saying the same thing. I want us to have the ability to invoke a referendum. Absolutely. That has to be in the hands of citizens. It has to be. There's no point of it if the government picks and chooses what they're going to do. It has to be binding. It has to be realistic. But I don't think we should have an independence referendum until we're ready for it. The worst thing we can do if you want independence, I've said this before on the show, is to go too soon. If you go and hold a referendum and come back with 20% support, you know what? You're not going to get another referendum for a decade. So think carefully. We got a lot of groundwork to do. But that's the things that Drew's working towards too. Let's talk about some of those things, right? Provincial police, provincial pension, these moves that we can do within our own province first. And Saskatchewan can do, BC can do, Manitoba can do. Quebec and Ontario are already doing all these things, by the way. It's just we're always assholes when we decide to try and do it for ourselves. There's quite a national double standard when it comes to that. But we aren't ready to go yet. We are not. There's not enough public support. Even if we had the ability, it just wouldn't happen. So keep working on things on the ground. The time might get there when it's ready, but it's not there quite yet. So yeah, and there's this CBC corrected 2 false stories about the Russians coming to get us. And the other thing Dave mentioned, I mean, so we've got the safety minister repeating those false claims. I've covered that in this show. I did a whole breakdown on that, on the complete lie. The convoy protesters were trying to burn down a building. I mean, that's scary stuff. If it was real, that's very scary. And I mean, it was ridiculous. You know, anybody with an IQ over 60 could look at the story as it came. All it was through a tweet thread. That's all it was. The basis of the facts on this, narrated, some security pictures narrated by a clown on Twitter. And about supposedly these Freedom Convoy guys who came and taped some door handles shut, lit a brick or something on fire in the middle of the floor, a fire brick, and self-identified when an apartment dweller was coming by. I guess they looked up and said, yes, we're with the convoy and we're going to burn your building down. He said, oh, well, heavens, I guess I'll just go to my room and go to bed. So he went upstairs and went to sleep. Didn't call the police, didn't call the fire department, and these guys apparently failed in burning it down. It was ridiculous. It was just a complete BS story. It was much like the Juicy Smollett crap. And it was proven to be so by the police, by investigations. Yet still today, this Mendocino, who's the public safety minister, so tied right in with invoking the Emergencies Act, is saying they invoked it because people were out there looking to burn buildings down. He's lying. He's lying to the investigators. He's lying right in our faces when the facts are right there that this didn't happen. He said in his statement, when seniors can't get around because public transportation can't get to them, when people who live in apartment buildings find their doors are locked and that fires are set in the hallways and corridors. That's what this cabinet minister, this senior politician in government said at an investigation as we're following up on this. These guys are going to lie to the bitter end. We're not going to get anything out of these investigations. We've already seen that. Trudeau stacked the next one with a liberal-friendly judge. They're not going to ask the right questions. We're not going to get the only thing that could possibly happen is throw those liberals out of power. And again, I don't think Canadians are ready to do that. We'll see. Poilievre is really lighting the world on fire, and we're really watching the liberal and the establishment machine turning their guns on him very hard and fiercely. So we'll see how that comes out. Perhaps Mr. Poilievre or another conservative candidate is going to shake things up. We got a race going on. Here's another one. A story saying we're unprepared for climate cuts. So they're starting to realize that these climate change emotions and notions and ideas and policies are going to cost jobs. Well, of course they are. Everybody's been saying that since day one, except for the zealots like Guilbeault and Trudeau in the government. But yes, apparently these climate programs threaten at least 170,000 jobs. And 170,000 jobs with little transition planning by the cabinet. And that's from the Environment Commissioner. So he's kind of a senior bureaucrat. And he compared the economic fallout to the 92 collapse of the cod fishery, on the East Coast. But you see the difference with the cod fishery is, well, I mean, it was due to some bad management and bad fishery management, but it was serious and everything else. Same sort of thing. This we could see coming. This is going to be due directly to bad policy. Bad government policy is going to cost nearly 200,000 jobs. And not just fossil fuel, though there's a whole whack of them in there. This transition is going to hit everything. We're all getting broker, people. We're in one of the richest countries in the world for things. I was talking, I think it was to Colin Craig about that the other day. Venezuela, by all measures, should be a very rich nation. Fantastic climate, loads of oil and gas. They have some great people there, a good location for shipping, exports, all of that. They got the perfect storm, should be one of the richest nations on earth. They're in hell and misery. They literally were breaking into zoos to eat farm animals. Their own currency went into the toilet. It's trash. People are desperately trying to escape there. Why? Because of bad government policy. All the resources in the world won't save your ass if your government is rotten. Canada's government's rotten. We aren't in Venezuela's situation yet, but we're moving in that direction, guys. And yeah, it's difficult. So this guy's saying, yeah, the climate change clock never stops ticking. We're moving closer to some critical deadlines the government set for itself. So I mean, some of what we can hope for out of these things, I guess, is that as the government tends to do so often, is they just back off on their own deadlines because they realize that they're not realistic and that they can't reach those things. But I mean, it's just such a stupid game of back and forth and back and forth. I think we did a bit of that when we talked about the Kyoto Protocol. That was actually one of Chrétien's actions. He set all these crazy climate reduction goals, and he was going to save us all from global warming back in the 90s. They didn't meet any of those. Then the Paris Accord. Now we got these clowns over in Scotland. They keep doing it and setting bars and not reaching them. But they still hurt us when they try. They still disrupt markets. They still steal from productive markets and give out to inefficient markets. So it costs us all when they set these deadlines and don't make them. So we've got to take them seriously. We've got to follow through with them. Let's see. I'm still waiting for Reid to show up here. We've got, let's look through some of Reid's stories. We got a BC children's dentist investigated after a young patient was hospitalized. Yeah, this guy was giving a weird anesthesia to patients. This is some scary stuff. See, I'm not sure. That's not a great story to expand further on. I'm sorry. Just when the guests show up late, it leaves me a little distracted at times. Here's another one Reid wrote. Northern BC chapel damaged by a suspicious fire. This is something that should be making more news. This is something that's always should have been making more news. And that's, these attacks on churches in Canada. There he is. Good. So, we will expand a bit on that because he knows more about the story than I do, because I just read them like you guys, and I rely on their interpretation. So we see Reid in the lobby there, and that's our BC reporter there. Before we get to him, actually, I'm going to quickly hit on one of our sponsors, and that's the Canadian Shooting Sports Association. These guys have been a great sponsor, and they are a great organization. Their name kind of says it all. They are a shooting sports association. You enjoy firearms in any sort of way or manner. You want to get into using firearms, owning firearms, these are the resource to be with. They're an association. They help you network with other firearm owners. They put you in touch with, they got videos, they got resources, how to safely use them. Different sports you can take part in, collecting. It's your business. It's your property. Hey, if you're as most of us who own firearms, we're obeying the law. We're not going to hurt anybody. We're not going to commit crimes. But you need to, share those resources and look into other ways to use your things. It's a hobby. A lot of people really enjoy them. Get on these guys. Canadian Shooting Sports Association, because it helps you as a firearm owner, and they help you. The other thing is they lobby on your behalf. So they've had court challenges against the Liberal government standing up for you. They've pushed back because the Liberals are trying to take away your firearms. We know that. Every firearm owner knows that. Not going to have that right for much longer if we don't stand up for ourselves. So get on, check these guys out. Canadian Shooting Sports Association, CSSA-CILA.org, and take out a membership with them, because that's how they can keep standing up for you and giving you those resources. All right, so let's bring Reid into the show here and review some of the news that's going on out on the wacky left coast there. Hey, Reid, how's it going?
I'm good, thanks. How are you doing?
Oh, pretty good, pretty good. You've been covering a lot of things. I guess I'll just, you heard a little bit jumping into one of your recent stories. It was from a couple of days ago, but have you heard more on that church that was burned out there in BC?
No updates. RCMP hasn't commented on it yet. The fire department did say that it was being investigated by RCMP, but they haven't made any comments. And the fire department chief actually thinks that there's a good chance that it may have been an accident. But regardless, it is being investigated, but there's been no updates. And I, to be honest, I don't expect that there will be.
Yeah, and we can't assume. I mean, accidents do happen. It could have been somebody irresponsibly leaving a candle out or an electrical fire. I mean,
right.
Fires did happen before all of the other things. It's just we are on edge with so many churches having been unfortunately targeted by arson in the last few years. So I'm sure you'll be watching that. If there's any updates, you'll be posting them.
Absolutely.
So what else we got top of the news? You wrote on that the gentleman having quite the time on a bus there out in Vancouver, was it?
Yeah. He was arrested, charged on 3 counts of assault and 1 count of assault with a weapon. And he was released in short order. So hopefully he didn't take a bus from the police station, because I'm sure the passengers have heard all about him by this point. But yeah, actually, right before I hopped on here, a bunch of old growth protesters were being cleared out of yet another highway blockade on a Boundary Road and Grandview Highway in Vancouver. It looks like 4 people were arrested so far, so that would bring the total number of arrested protesters to at least 85 in the past few weeks since the highway blockades began. So I expect we'll be seeing some more of that in the coming days as well, because it's been at least every other day there's been arrests made due to old growth logging protests around the west coast of BC.
So are these the same protesters being caught and released and caught and released and caught and released, or are they kind of spreading out different ones every time?
No, they're being released and getting arrested multiple times. And again, these are different protesters from the like environmental pipeline demonstrators in northern BC. Completely different thing. But yeah, these guys are clearly taking it seriously. They're gluing themselves. There was another person that glued themselves to the roadway today. That's a common theme of their protests. Another man just ended his 33-day hunger strike today. Another guy is on day 27 of his hunger strike and was actually hospitalized due to not consuming fluids for over 50 hours. And he resumed his hunger strike as soon as he was out of the hospital, and he's on day 27 now. So yeah, they certainly mean business. They're taking it very seriously, but unfortunately, for them, it looks like public response is not on their side. People are very frustrated, especially in and around Vancouver and the Lower Mainland, where traffic is already the bane of everyone's existence.
Yeah, and I see Nico brought up one of those. I mean, a lot of us saw that video the other week with a bunch of those hammerheads all sitting in the middle of a road and blocking a bunch of commuters. And people got out of their cars and just pulled them off the road. They're sick of waiting for the police. They're sick of being delayed by these guys. And it's only going to get worse if this doesn't get resolved, I imagine. I mean, I don't know, when these protests happen, I mean, if they start getting a groundswell of public support, that's how they can change things. But in general, it seems to be still kind of a small fringe, but a very annoying one.
Yeah, I mean, I have their exact demand, which is, quote, pass legislation to immediately end all old growth logging in the province of BC. So that's their overall demand. And their hunger strike demand specifically is a public meeting with Katrine Conroy, the Minister of Forests, to discuss old growth logging. So they said they're just going to continue onward with their protests, and they're more than willing to be arrested until their demands are met, which are fairly broad. So yeah, we'll see what happens with that.
Yeah, well, hunger striking like that with a demand to meet somebody, it's just kind of the grown-up version of a toddler who tries to hold their breath so they can get their way from their parents, I guess, right? Usually the best way to do it is just let them hold their breath until they either pass out or give up. So I don't know. This is just my view. Well, let them starve. It's I don't want to see somebody die, but what else are you supposed to do with these guys?
Right.
But that's just my view. Getting on, I was ranting a little earlier. You had a story that you had put up about a lawsuit, speaking of personal responsibility, with this drunkard who traveled from a number of bars there and got pretty heavily inebriated. Now he's suing them all.
Yeah. He this happened back in 2016, and he is suing all the venues that served him drinks prior to him falling down and sustaining a head injury. So yeah, he got off work, immediately downed a few drinks at his workplace, and then made the rounds, and eventually, 25 or so drinks later, fell down and hit his head, and is now saying that everyone that served him is liable. So yeah, that's That's interesting. And the thing is too, in Vancouver and BC in particular, is if you if you overserve someone as a bartender, or if you just serve them period, and they get hurt or they do something stupid, it's very easy to get in trouble. So
Yeah.
it looks like he'll be getting paid damages. I imagine it happens all the time. I remember, when I was younger, I was working in the hospitality industry. That was always a stress. The managers and owners were always, very, very adamant about making sure, you don't let anyone in that's had too much to drink. You don't serve them, because if they fall and hurt themselves later in the night and they were at your establishment, you could be liable, and it happens all the time.
Yeah, it's the same here in Alberta, and you have to take your pro serve where it teaches you about all that, and it makes it difficult because it's a narrow margin industry. As I said, I own a bar. You're motivated. I mean, you got to sell the booze. That's the goal of the bar, but at the same time, you don't want to cross the line and overserve, and servers are put in a difficult position of judging. What got me with this guy was that he went bar to bar to bar. You don't know when they walked in the door if they're dead sober or if they've had 10 drinks before they got there, but it seems that doesn't seem to matter in the courts.
Right. And of course, in Vancouver, there's a lot of establishments have multiple bars throughout the venue. So you could go in and, get a double vodka soda at one bar, and then go to another bar and then another one, all in the same establishment, and never have the same bartender twice. So there's really no way of keeping track, but that's just how it is. And
Yeah.
another interesting story that I'm going to be releasing later this afternoon is I've learned of a motel, a BC motel, that is denying entry to unvaccinated people. So irrespective of provincial mandates, which were lifted a few weeks ago, and didn't include motels or hotels to begin with, this motel is turning people away who are unvaccinated. So I'll have a detailed story on that up later this afternoon.
Great. Well, that's their right as a business, I guess. I don't know if it's a smart plan. I mean, how many? Oh boy, I just don't get with the vaccinated fixated, right? Like, what difference if the guy in the room next to you isn't vaccinated or is? For one, we know it doesn't really reduce spread, and even if you thought it did, it's not like you're sharing a room. But we'll see. I guess it's their right as a business.
Of course, and yeah, there's, based off of different people that I've talked to in regards to this particular situation, people are kind of saying the same thing. It's maybe I don't agree with it, but it's their right as a private business. But then you have some people that are saying, well, it's blatant, unequivocal discrimination. And then you have other people that are saying that, oh, they're just watching out for their community, and they're doing, the right thing. And so, there's a whole range of perspectives there. And I'll talking to a wide range of people in regards to that. Another story that will be coming out this week will be the BC College of Nurses and Midwives are investigating a BC nurse for her, what they're calling off-duty conduct. And what they mean by that is her, going on social media and speaking about gender in a way that is inappropriate. And basically, she's just saying that she takes issue with self-ID legislation, and she believes that gender is biologically based. So there will be a disciplinary hearing for her at the end of May. So I'll have a story coming out detailing that this week as well.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to watch. It's getting to be such difficult waters for them to navigate, especially in medicine. I mean, I can understand we want to accommodate people. If a person's trans, they want to be, referred to the gender of their preference. I'm fine with that. That's no problem. But when we get to physiological reality, and that's where the trans community seems to have gone over the line, that we have to be allowed to address it, whether it's in sports or in medicine. I mean, there's no sense trying to check a prostate on a biological woman or try to test for cervical cancer on a biological man, no matter how they're identifying or what they've tried to do. Like, let's just let our nurses and doctors be realistic with this. It's getting just kind of ludicrous.
Right. And that's what a lot of people would say, but then there are also other people that are saying that that perspective is provides an unsafe environment, as they say, for gender diverse people. It's kind of a hot topic in BC right now, especially with puberty blockers and a particular piece of legislation that we have in BC that allows young children to receive puberty blocking treatment irrespective of their parent or guardian. So it's interesting.
You're on the front line of the woke. I mean, getting further with mandates and things, so even beyond provincial mandates, pretty much everything's been lifted provincially, I guess, for you guys. It was a few days ago, it was kind of last week, but UBC has said they're going to keep their mask mandate all the way through the summer now, have they?
Yeah, UBC is going to be maintaining their mask mandates until June 30th at the earliest. And then, yeah, again, not all mandates are gone. If public healthcare workers that were removed from work due to their vaccine status are not yet allowed to return. And there's no date on when they will be allowed to return. Health officials, public health officials in BC have acknowledged that the vaccine's efficacy wanes over time. So maybe they will eventually have to allow them to return, or maybe they'll require, you'll have to have had a dose within the past 6 to 8 months or something like that. But at this point in time, all public healthcare workers, in acute care, long-term care, community care, nurses are not allowed to return to work unless they're vaccinated. So yeah, and actually BC is going to be bringing in an influx of foreign trained nurses as well, as opposed to just bringing back the nurses that were let go.
Yeah, there's still some craziness going on. I should bring up Sherry Stewart who commented, please don't say BC means Vancouver area. Okay, BC is a big diverse province, and Lower Mainland is kind of a special part of the world versus Northern BC or Central BC or Eastern BC. So fair enough, but it is where a lot of the news and the actions come from. So, okay, well, there's always lots to keep you busy and covering out there, Reid. A number of stories we can see dropping in the future coming down. I appreciate you checking in with us, and look forward to reading more as you report out there. Awesome. Thanks very much, Cory. Great, thanks. So yes, that's Reid Small, and just remind everybody, he's putting out a lot of great stories in BC, so we're not as Alberta centric as we were when we first began. We're really expanding. We're getting a lot of great reporters and columnists from all across the country out there. And BC, boy, that is just the land of the woke, isn't it? I mean, they go beyond reason. And unfortunately, as it's coming along, it's protest season. That's what's happening. It's nice weather. There's a whole bunch of these bums, and they're bums. And they're collecting whatever social services they may be collecting. They don't have to answer to anybody. So they got nothing better to do than go and glue their dumb butts to a highway and block people who are out trying to work for a living. And the double standard is pretty interesting, There's so many critical infrastructure points, and we will seize bank accounts, we'll arrest people, we'll charge people for protesting against mandates. But hey, if these are climate crusaders, they can just go in and out of jail, and we'll just keep releasing them and never follow through. I'm not talking about incarcerating somebody who gets caught at a protest once and throwing them in jail for a year. No. But at some point, you do have to draw a line. If they keep coming back, they keep blocking the road with no end game, how many times have you got to put them in and out of the system? We'll see. We'll see. Our justice system has some true double standards, and that's something that was one of our top, columns from the other week. Was from David Craden out in Ottawa, and that was because RCMP chose not to charge Justin Trudeau, even though it looked like with the whole Aga Khan thing, Trudeau committed a crime. He should be charged. He should, they should follow through. He was sanctioned by the ethics commissioner or something like that. There are two different sanctions for that. This was a sitting prime minister in a gross conflict of interest to the point of potentially being criminally so, and he never got charged. If it was you or me, we would have been charged. That's the way it is. And they said that it would cause more disruption to charge him than to just let it go, so they let it go. That's a real big problem. That's a bad precedent, and not enough people are discussing that whatsoever. So we're following up on these things, and we're reporting on these things. So what else have we got on the go here before I get our next guest who's coming in? Yeah, so I admit I'm just going to pop over to the CTV site because I like to torture myself there at Legacy Media now once in a while. And the Conservatives are calling on the RCMP to have another look at Trudeau's Aga Khan trip and see if there isn't something there. But, again, Trudeau appoints the head of the RCMP. She's not going to get involved in that. So, I mean, the Trudeaus can ask, and they might as well keep it in the news, and it's important. But I wouldn't hold my breath on expecting Justin Trudeau to be held accountable in any sort of way anytime soon on that whole issue. What else we got on the go? Well, I'll have to look into that later. A census offers a snapshot of Canada's transgender population for the first time, apparently. I'll look into it. I wonder how many there really are. I mean, for the amount of news and oxygen it takes, I'd imagine we've got to have hundreds of thousands of transgender people, right? I suspect it might be a few less than that, but we'll have a look at that a little later. Okay, I'm going to talk about one of our advertisers before we cut over to our guest here, and that is, we'll talk one more time about Bitcoin Well, and they are at bitcoinwell.com. They've been good to us. You're looking at digital currencies, you're looking to broaden your portfolio, you're looking to get into different stuff. These are the guys to do it for you. They're an Alberta company. They're publicly traded. They're trustworthy. That's important. It's your money. You've worked for it. They've got things to help you through it. I mean, they call it, I think it's Bitcoin Academy. It's online. They're partnered with Athabasca University. You can take courses on there and see what it's all about. So you know you're confidently investing your money in the ways that it should be, and it can be protected. So check them out. They got personalized one-on-one service. They can set up all sorts of things, direct deposits from your bank account, bill payments, all sorts of stuff. It's like any other currency. It's bitcoinwell.com, a good Western Canadian company and a good sponsor to us so far. Okay, we're going to get to Franco Terrazzano of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. He's in the studio with us today. Hey there, Franco. How's it going?
Boy, man, it's great. I love being in the studio. The office looks great, and I love being back in Calgary, man.
Oh, yeah. Well, you're back out west. I mean, you know, you had to take that great sacrifice for your career and go to the heart of the hornet's nest out in Ottawa. You got an interesting year to be out there for anyways.
Yeah, I mean, I like to say that I'm in the business of uncovering government waste, and business, unfortunately, is really good in Ottawa.
Yeah, no, you've never got any shortage of things to go on.
Yeah.
You're the federal director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. So what are some of the good things you guys have been on about this week?
Well, I think one of the biggest things that we've been working on is this pickup truck tax that has been kind of floating around in the ether. Of course, Blacklock's reporter was the organization that first talked about it. But my colleague in British Columbia, Chris Sims, she actually went into this 271-page report that was like this advisory report. It was published by Environment Canada, so a federal department, and buried in the annex of a report is this little recommendation saying that, well, we should extend this one type of tax to hit pickup trucks. So if you drive a Ford F-150, for example, if this new truck tax were to come into place, you would end up shelling out about $1,000. Now, if you have a heavy duty, if this tax were to be imposed, it would cost you about $4,000.
Which for a tradesperson, that's a lot of money. I mean, that's what gets me with these things. You know, they punish the people in these, but there's nowhere else for them to move viably. I mean, they need these vehicles for their jobs. They need it for their work. I mean, their landscaper can't show up in a Prius.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think there's like two different types of considerations we need to think about here. Number one is well, let's face it, Canadians need a new tax like we need a hole in the head. This is the worst possible time to be bringing in a new tax. 6.7% inflation. People still struggling with the effects of 2 years of revolving government lockdowns, right? So the first part is the tax implications. This is going to be a lot of money for a lot of people who are probably still struggling. But the second thing, to your point, is that we have to remember pickup trucks for many people, that is what they need to live their lives and to also put food on the table. So Cory, I mean, you're an Alberta boy. You know that if you want to pull a horse trailer, you can't exactly do that in a Chevy Aveo. No, you need a pickup truck, right? If you're working in oil and gas, you probably need a pickup truck. It would almost be like putting a tax on like laptops or Zoom for the stay-at-home class, which is essentially what I am as well.
Well, yeah, or if you're a framer or a roofer, I mean, there's no end to the things. And then the other part is, you know what, if you just want it for bloody recreation, you shouldn't be punished for it anyhow.
Yeah.
But I guess part of the problem is the government can't manage to bring the price of EVs down low enough for consumers. So they're hoping if they raise the price of everything else high enough, they'll get people into them. It's just going to punish us.
Oh, great. Raise the cost of living even more, right?
Yeah,
that's what we need. Yeah.
So, but the thing that was interesting with that too was Guilbeault was questioned on it, our environmental crusader in chief in Ottawa, and he denied it.
Yeah.
He said that they weren't doing it.
Well, what he said is that it's not government policy.
Well, not
What he
yet.
said is that it's not a
Okay.
tax yet, right? But hey, don't you remember back just before the 2019 election? Remember then Environment Minister Catherine McKenna? Remember when she was asked, is the carbon tax going to continue to go up beyond $50 per ton? What did she say? She said, oh, we have no intention, right? Okay, so fool me once, right? But fool me twice, I don't think so. And we have to remember, I mean, this is how new taxes come in. Right, you get this advisory report that recommends a new tax, and then you have parliamentarians. They start to debate it, and wham bam, taxpayers are hit with another burden. Right, so if the minister wanted to put water on this fire, he could have done so right away by saying, you know what, we disagree with that recommendation fundamentally. There is absolutely zero way or zero chance that we're going to be putting in this pickup truck, but we haven't heard that.
Okay, well, and to pivot away from that, speaking of recommendations that the government keeps denying every time we hear about them, the CMHC yet again appears to be studying a home equity tax.
Yeah, I mean, we already know that they spent $250,000 on a report that is recommending a home tax. And what's so crazy about this report is that the report was actually supposed to look at ways to improve housing affordability. Well, Cory, are you telling me that this is the first tax in the history of all human history where a tax is actually going to lower prices? Like, come on. What is a tax going to do? It raises the cost of everything. So a new home tax would do two things. Number one, either people would add the tax, they would tack it onto the home price, raising prices. Or number two, people might just decide not to sell their home, which reduces supply even further, again, raising prices. And through access to information requests, we found out that, well, they're still giving out taxpayers money to continue to talk about these types of home taxes.
Well, it's it. It's kind of one of those where there's smoke, there's fire situations. I mean, okay, once if it was out of the blue, a strange rogue study, but this is, I think, the third time the CMHC has dipped their toe into these equity tax waters.
It's not the first time. And Cory, let me tell you something that really boils my blood. The CMHC is a federal crown corporation. By its own words, it says it has one primary objective, and that's housing affordability. Well, over the last 2 years, we've seen home prices skyrocket. You know what else has happened over the last 2 years? They've been busy handing out about $48 million in bonuses to their employees. What would happen if you completely were miserable at your job? Would you be getting these huge bonuses?
Actually, I am miserable as an individual.
Yeah.
But in doing it, no, I can't see Mr. Fildebrand throwing us any extra money unless we really justify it. But yeah, only in la la land of government, when you have such measurable results that obviously aren't working, would you be rewarded? It kind of reminds me of, just to pivot back to a local one you haven't had to deal with in a while, but Calgary's slush fund with the Calgary Economic Development. It's supposed to bring in business and fill our downtown. Well, we've got an empty downtown. We've got a lot of problems with business. They're relocating all over the place outside of the city. And they all get high salaries and bonuses all over the place in that little world as well.
That corporate slush fund was the bane to my existence when I was the Alberta director. Cory, me and you worked together a lot to kind of raise awareness. And I always kind of go back to this. I think it was back in 2019 when there was that small business tax rally that we were at. And I don't know about you, but I was just speaking to businesses like, hey, what do you want city council to do? And you know what? All the businesses I talked to, you know what they said? Well, we want them to manage our money prudently. We don't want them to waste money. And we want them to lower our taxes. I didn't hear a single business say, we want a corporate slush fund managed by these bureaucrats who are fumbling all over themselves.
Well, can you take some money from my business and hand it out to my competitors and try and bring them in? I mean, that's what they're expecting.
Oh, and cut a little bit off the top for yourself for all the bureaucrat salaries that have to oversee this thing.
Yeah, well, and so you guys at the Taxpayers Federation, though, you've got more moves going on. You're busy. So it sounds like Chris Sims is actually moving out here to Alberta.
And she's going to be so good, man. She's amazing. She's gonna do a really good job holding the Alberta government to account, but then also these huge spending politicians running around these cities.
Yeah, well, and I'll be getting Chris to address those issues as they keep popping up, because we need that. I mean, we need that scrutiny all over the place. You're in the big pool pond over there, but it's everywhere, and people forget the municipal level and how badly you're getting it sometimes. Some of the commenters mentioned, I mentioned it earlier a little bit too, with the farmers and fertilizer.
Okay.
And now we've got and now I don't know if there's been a tax plan yet or anything, but the government sounds like they're committing to reducing. It sounds just like with our carbon taxes, fertilizer use to 30% below 2020 levels. It seems the only tool they ever can pull out of their toolbox is a tax. Have you heard anything about how they might be looking into?
Well, we're definitely keeping an eye out because we hear from farmers all the time that the government is making these tough times tougher. I haven't heard about a tax per se, but to your point, it almost seems like anytime a government wants to solve a problem, its only answer is just another tax, right? The carbon tax. It wants to reduce emissions. What does it do? Hammers Canadians with a carbon tax. When emissions continue to go up and the carbon tax fails, what do? Just hammer them with a higher carbon tax. We're talking about the CMHC. Housing affordability is a real issue. But what do these bureaucrats want to do? Fund a report looking at another home tax. And here's another one, the vaccine tax. Remember the tax that was on the unvaccinated that was floated out by the premier in Quebec?
Yes.
That's another example of whenever these politicians think there is a problem, that their only solution seems to be, just make life for Canadians more difficult through higher taxes.
Well, and even Quebec kind of figured that one out and backed off on
Yep.
it, thankfully. That was ridiculous. I mean, basically, again, use taxation as a hammer to punish people for not choosing a medical procedure that they choose not to. I mean, it's not getting into the discussion of the efficacy of vaccines or not.
Sure.
It's just, it's as you said, it's always that. And they always fall back on a tax
Yep.
as a tool. So what do you got up and coming for us here in days to come?
Well, let me give you a few things. We just finished our National Debt Clock tour. We chatted about that. We went coast to coast, showing the government's $1 trillion debt going up by about $1,600 per second. We started in Victoria, went all the way to Halifax. We were on the road for about a month and a half. And in that time, the federal debt increased by about $8 billion. So we just finished that. I think this is like my second day not doing it. So taking a little bit of time in Calgary. A few things we have coming up. We're going to have our annual gas tax honesty day in May to show Canadians that, you know what, a big part of the painful prices that you're paying at the pumps is actually through taxes. So stay tuned to that. We're talking about Chris Sims coming to Alberta. And so I just want to highlight one thing that we're still going to be fighting here in Alberta, and that is the sneaky form of backdoor income taxation known as bracket creep.
Yes.
Premier Kenney, before his first budget, he said he would get a plan to balance the books without raising taxes. Well, he did raise taxes in his first budget, and he did it through the back door through bracket creep. And we're going to continue to hammer him on that.
Well, and ironically, I believe it was Kenny might even been the one who coined the term bracket creep, because that's what was happening with the Klein government in the 90s. And Kenny was on
the federal government too, when he was a reform member of parliament.
Yes.
When he was with the CTF back in the 90s, and when he was a reform member of parliament, he used to hammer bracket creep. And he used to call it a very, very sneaky form of taxation. You know, the way that he used to hammer the federal Liberals at the time, I could only imagine if he would say the same words to his own finance minister, Travis Taves, when he brought in bracket creep. If he was that tough with Taves as he was as a federal member of parliament, I think Taves would have thought twice before bringing that in. And
I did have Taves on the show just after the budget.
Sure.
I asked him about it. And he said they'll look to address it in a year or two. So
yeah, just trust us, hey?
We'll get around to it. It's on the list.
Okay, perfect.
But yeah, bracket creep, just I guess to explain to some people who might not be familiar with it too. It's just where you can use inflation as a form of increasing taxes on people. I mean, as your income might go up, but your spending power is going down, and you start paying a higher tax bracket, you're getting burned.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Bracket creep is when the government uses inflation to fatten its own coffers, right? Because brackets are supposed to go up over time with inflation, because the whole idea is that, well, if you can't afford to buy more, you shouldn't pay more in taxes. Well, bracket creep completely derails that notion by not moving brackets with inflation. So more people get bumped up into paying higher taxes, even though they can't afford to buy more. But there's another part, right? Because we all have a tax-free portion of our income. Well, over time, bracket creep erodes that tax-free portion of our income because it doesn't increase as inflation goes up.
So just to close up, I guess, the federal leadership race is going on with the Conservatives. I imagine you're watching it closely. You guys, advocate and you try to get on these leadership races for all parties and so on. O'Toole signed promising to get rid of the carbon tax before it, unfortunately, he forgot about his promise in his signature. Yes, okay, he'll be blunt about it.
No. He lied to taxpayers. Let's be honest, and let's call a spade a spade. He didn't forget. Oh, I forgot. No, he lied about it. And let me tell you why we say that. The pledge was black and white. It said he would scrap the Trudeau government's carbon tax and he would replace it with nothing. And then he had the audacity not just to do a complete 180 and decide to bring in a carbon tax of his own. He had the audacity to play word games and insult Canadians' intelligence, because he said his carbon tax somehow wasn't a tax at all. So we actually have to call a spade a spade. He didn't forget. He lied to taxpayers on this carbon tax promise, but guess what? He was held accountable.
Well, he's not there any longer, so it didn't seem to work out for him. So
Yep.
you're going to be, I imagine, talking with candidates and
Yep.
pushing on tax issues and things like that going forward over the summer, I imagine.
And we already are. And we're already seeing some of the candidates come out against a carbon tax. Mr. Poilievre, he was very clear and very quick to say that he would scrap the Trudeau government's carbon tax. Right away, we said, well, we're not just going to be fooled by that one. We sent him a note and he responded back to us saying he's not going to replace the carbon tax with anything. So he's going to scrap the carbon tax. That's good news. Now, I think it was yesterday, we also hear that Charest is going to scrap the carbon tax at the pumps and on home heating bills. That's really good news. There are some concerns with Charest's policy. He wants to bring in an industrial carbon tax, but of course, families would end up feeling that pain as well. But also Charest also wants to bring in what amounts to a second carbon tax. So there's issues with Charest's policies for sure. But Cory, it's great to see politicians wanting to fight the carbon tax, because only a few months ago, you had these pundits in Ottawa saying that carbon tax was a moot issue. Well, it's not a moot issue, and it's great to see politicians going back on the attack.
Well, I appreciate you guys out there holding their feet to the fire. Hopefully it's not a case of having to get on their case as a flip-flopper down the road, and we'll actually have one of them follow through on their promises. So maybe I'll just kind of wrap the show, actually. We're getting near the top of the hour. I rarely do that. Well, I got a guest in the room, but why not? It's been a full show, a real packed one. I appreciate you coming in and talking to us. Always do. Of course, you're a regular guest. As I say, I keep bringing you taxpayers guys in because I just like having somebody in who's not asking for more of my money. They're trying to save some of it. So where can people find information about you guys and what you're doing? Actually, I'll let you get that plug in before we go.
Well, thanks for having me on. Taxpayer.com is where you need to go. Check out our newsroom. Check out our petitions. You can see the debtclock.ca right there to see the debt going up in real time. Cory, thanks for having me on. I'm looking at the time. I have to run to hit my next meeting. So thank you so much.
Thank you. All right. So Franco's going to run for it there, and we will wrap things up here, guys. So tomorrow I've got another good show. We're going to actually have Jeremy Farkas on. People remember him as the city councilor, the one who really stirred up a number of, he used to drive Mayor Nenshi bananas, and he's a very good libertarian activist sort of guy. He ran for mayor. Unfortunately, Mayor Gondek won. And now Jeremy's gotten on with a Big Brothers and Sisters fundraiser, though, where he's hiking and jogging all the way from the Mexican border up to Canada. And he's been putting a lot of updates on Facebook and Twitter. You see the pictures. He's going through some real cool country, hiking in some backcountry areas and all that, and raising money. And he's raised a good amount already. It's a good cause. He's raising more. So we're going to do a live check-in with Jeremy tomorrow. I'm looking forward to that. I haven't talked to him since he's gone down south. And we've got a new Western Standard reporter. He's up in Northern Alberta. His name's Arthur Green. And he's written some great stories already. Actually, he wrote one of the ones where ripping into Dr. Vipond. And Arthur describes himself as a goofy newfie. He's a character, and he's also a great story writer with the Standard, another new edition. So we're going to talk to him about what he's been up to. And, of course, we'll have whatever other issues of the day are going on. As well, remember, tonight the Pipeline will be airing, and that's the weekly show with Dave Naylor and our publisher, Derek Fildebrand, and myself. And we kind of break down the top 2 or 3 issues we see worth discussing through the week. So make sure to watch the Western Standard channels to see that when it comes up tonight. Subscribe to all those channels when these specials do come up. And thank you all for tuning in today. I'll see you tomorrow at 11:30.